there's a version of you that doesn't flinch when someone disrespects you. A version that doesn't react, doesn't beg, doesn't explain. A version of you that simply observes, and when the moment is right, walks away without a word. This isn't coldness, it's emotional control. And Carl Jung would argue, it's one of the highest forms of psychological power. Most people think controlling your emotions means suppressing them. But that's not what Jung taught. He believed true mastery isn't about bottling your anger, fear, or sadness. It's about becoming conscious of them. Because the moment you become conscious, you are no longer a slave. Let's be honest. The world constantly pokes your emotional wounds. Someone says the wrong thing, and you spiral. Someone ignores you, and your mind fills the gap with stories. You try to act calm on the outside, but inside, you're boiling, shaking, shrinking. And it's not your fault, because since childhood, you were trained to react emotionally. You were taught that emotions are either bad or something to be acted upon immediately. But Jung believed this emotional chaos comes from one place. You don't know who's really in control inside you. Your inner child, your shadow, your ego, they all fight for the wheel. And unless you bring these forces to consciousness, you will always be driven by emotional storms. Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." So let's break that down. Think of every time you overreacted, that message you read too deeply into, that silence you couldn't handle, that insult you couldn't forget. Was it really about what happened? Or was it about something that already existed inside you, waiting to be triggered? Here's the brutal truth. Most of your reactions aren't about the present. They're echoes of the past. Unhealed wounds, unmet needs, and unconscious beliefs. That's why Carl Jung didn't say control your emotions. He said, understand who's feeling them. Imagine this. You're in a room with someone who insults you. You feel a burn in your chest. Your jaw tightens. Your hands sweat. But instead of reacting, you take a breath. You notice the emotion. You ask, who inside me is hurting right now? Is it the child who was once humiliated in front of others? Is it the part of you that feels invisible in relationships? Or is it your ego, wounded that someone dared to challenge you? That pause, that awareness, that's where power begins. Most people live in a state of unconscious reactivity. They say things they don't mean. They do things they regret. And then they blame the world for making them feel that way. But Jung said, the world doesn't make you feel anything. It only shows you what's already inside you. Here's where it gets deeper. Your emotional triggers are not weaknesses. They're maps. Maps pointing directly to your unresolved shadow. And if you dare to follow that map, you don't just become emotionally stable. You become emotionally unbreakable. You stop being someone who explodes. And instead, you become someone who decides. Every emotion becomes a tool. Anger becomes boundaries. Sadness becomes reflection. Fear becomes awareness. Even silence becomes a weapon. Jung believed that emotional mastery is not about becoming emotionless. It's about feeling deeply and choosing wisely. Let me tell you something you weren't told growing up. Your emotions are real, but they are not always true. Just because you feel rejected doesn't mean you are rejected. Just because you feel unworthy doesn't mean you are unworthy. Your feelings are messages, not commandments. Jung's work teaches you to become the observer, not the puppet. The more you observe, the more you separate your identity from your reactions. And that separation, that's the space where you reclaim your freedom. Because without emotional control, people can manipulate you. They can bait you. They can own you. And worst of all, they can break you. But once you master your emotions, you become unreadable, unshakable, and in many ways, dangerous. Not because you're violent or cruel, but because you're in control of the one thing no one else is: yourself. This is what Jung meant by individuation, becoming a whole, integrated person, not ruled by guilt, not by shame, not by fear, but by inner clarity. And here's the secret Jung never said directly, but implied in all his work. The most dangerous person in the room is the one who doesn't flinch, because that person has already met their inner chaos and mastered it. Let's make something clear. Emotional control is not about appearing strong. It's about becoming internally unshakable. There's a big difference. You can wear a calm face and still be boiling inside. You can say, "I'm over it," and still check their messages at midnight. You can act confident, but secretly crumble when someone pulls away. So, what is true control? Carl Jung believed the strongest people aren't those who don't feel. They're the ones who feel everything, but choose how to respond. Because emotion, in its rawest form, is energy. It doesn't care about your plans. It doesn't ask for permission. It erupts. And the unconscious loves to hijack moments of weakness. Jung explained it like this: your ego thinks it's in charge, but it's your shadow, the unseen emotional chaos within, that often takes the wheel. Think of all the times you've done things and said, "Why did I do that? Why couldn't I stop myself?" That wasn't me. It was. It was the part of you you've never met. The shadow doesn't speak in logic. It speaks in reactions. It speaks through silence, jealousy, neediness, withdrawal, outbursts, sabotage, and shame. And the reason emotional control feels impossible is because most people are battling their shadow while pretending it doesn't exist. Let me give you an example. Imagine someone ignores your text. Your logical brain says, "They're probably busy." But you don't feel peace. Your chest tightens. Your thoughts spiral. You feel rejected. Now pause. Where is that coming from? Not from this person. From your emotional memory. Maybe it's your father who ignored you, Maybe it's a childhood friend who ghosted you. Maybe it's an ex who abandoned you without explanation. Your body doesn't differentiate. It remembers the emotion and brings all of it into this one moment. That's what Jung meant when he said, "The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parents." Because we don't just inherit DNA. We inherit emotional suppression. We inherit coping mechanisms. We inherit emotional immaturity. So what do? You create illusions. You become the cool person who doesn't care. You become the nice person who avoids conflict. You become the busy person who distracts from their own mind. But the emotions are still there, beneath the surface. And you'll keep overreacting, over-explaining, overthinking, and overcompensating until you finally integrate the emotion. Let's talk about how to actually do that. Carl Jung's path to emotional control was through integration, not elimination. Step 1. Expose your triggers. Don't avoid them. Write them down. When do you lose control? Who makes you feel small? What patterns repeat in your relationships? Make a list. And here's the twist. Every single trigger points to a part of your shadow. If someone makes you feel not good enough, your shadow probably contains old wounds of inadequacy. If you feel instantly angry when interrupted, your shadow might contain unacknowledged feelings of powerlessness from childhood. Don't just look at the trigger. Look at the wound behind it. That's where the real control begins. Step 2. Personify the emotion. This might sound strange, but it's powerful. Instead of saying, "I'm angry," say, "There's a part of me that feels betrayed." Give it shape. Give it voice. Ask, "What do you need from me? What memory are you protecting? What story are you trying to replay?" Jung taught that the unconscious wants to be seen. And once you start engaging with your emotions, like characters in a play, something profound happens. They lose control over you. Because now you're directing the story. Step 3. Feel it without acting on it. This is the hardest part. To sit with rage and not punch a wall. To sit with sadness and not reach out to someone who broke you. To sit with anxiety and not escape into scrolling or sugar or validation. The modern world teaches us emotional escape. But Jung taught emotional confrontation. Let yourself feel. Let the wave rise. Observe it like a storm passing over the ocean. You're the ocean, not the storm. Sit in stillness, because the ability to feel deeply without reacting is the true badge of inner power. Step 4. Transmute the emotion. Don't stop at silence. Transmute it. Take that anxiety and turn it into planning. Take that anger and turn it into boundaries. Take that sadness and turn it into writing, art, solitude to healing. Jung believed that the process of individuation, becoming whole, requires transformation. You take your emotional chaos and you shape it into something intentional. You become the alchemist of your own inner world. And here's what nobody tells you. Once you become emotionally controlled, people will start accusing you of being cold. They'll say you've changed. You don't react like you used to. You don't chase anymore. You don't explain. And that's okay. Let them say what they want. Because the truth is, you've become dangerously centered. You've become so aware of your emotional history that nobody can manipulate it anymore. Not their hot and cold games, not their passive aggression, not their sudden silence. You know exactly what they're trying to trigger, and you choose not to dance. You've rewired the pattern. You've broken the emotional loop. And that, my friend, is a power most people will never know. Because they're still ruled by fear, by abandonment, by shame, by the need to prove, by the urge to be loved, even by those who disrespect them. But you've entered the deeper world, the world Jung pointed to, where emotional mastery becomes spiritual evolution, where calm becomes your superpower, where silence becomes a message, where self-respect becomes your reflex, not your effort. That's emotional control. And this is just the beginning. They will test you, not with words, but with silence, with distance, with disrespect wrapped in sweetness, with mixed signals that keep you confused. And if you're not emotionally in control, you'll fall for it every time. Let's be honest. Most people don't lose emotional control because they're weak. They lose it because they still care too much about things that never cared back. That's where boundaries come in. But here's what Carl Jung knew. Boundaries are not rules for other people. They're rules for yourself. They're the inner compass that tells you, this is how far I'll go before I lose myself. This is where I stop proving, fixing, or begging. This is where I walk away, even if I still love them. And here's the real psychological truth. The more you crave emotional control, the more you must be willing to detach. Not from people, but from your need to be understood, from your obsession with fairness, from your illusion that if you just love them more, they'll finally treat you right. Because some people don't need healing. They need someone to control. And if you still need their approval to feel whole, you're already under their spell. Jung believed that emotional maturity is the ability to stand in the fire of rejection, abandonment, misunderstanding, and not collapse. And that's rare, because most people live in emotional reaction. He didn't text? Panic. She pulled away? Chase. They disrespected you? Over-explain. All of that is rooted in an unhealed wound that says, if I'm not chosen, I'm not valuable. Let me say this brutally clear. Your value is not proven in other people's acceptance. It's proven in your self-regulation. Can you feel rejected and not react? Can you feel triggered and not retaliate? Can you walk away with grace instead of exploding with drama? That's emotional control. And here's where it gets even deeper. You think you're reacting to the present person, but you're actually reacting to an old memory dressed in new clothes. Your subconscious is always scanning. Does this feel like when my father abandoned me? Does this feel like when my mother ignored me? Does this feel like when I was left out as a child? So what you think is love is often emotional reenactment. You're not falling for them. You're falling into a familiar emotional pattern. And they don't have to be toxic to trigger you. Even a kind, stable person can make you feel anxious if you grew up in emotional chaos. Why? Because your nervous system was trained to interpret peace as boring, drama as love, absence as desire. And unless you retrain your body, you'll always feel drawn to the wrong people. Carl Jung called this repetition compulsion, the unconscious drive to repeat the emotional past until it is finally healed. So how do you break it? By becoming the observer. You pause in the moment and ask, is this real? Or is this familiar? Am I actually hurt or just triggered? Do I want this person, or do I want their validation to fill an old void? Those questions change your life. Because emotional control isn't about denying emotion. It's about clarifying it. Let's talk about relationships. When you don't have emotional control, you attract people who feed on your instability. They like your overthinking. They like your jealousy. They like that you're constantly insecure because it gives them control. And you call it love. No, it's trauma bonding. But once you develop emotional control, something strange happens. You become boring to toxic people. They can't hook you anymore. They can't destabilize you. They can't bait you into chasing. You sit there, calm, clear, grounded, and they're forced to face their own chaos. Some will leave. Some will attack. Some will say, "You've changed." Good. Because you didn't heal to stay relatable. You healed to become free. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Your reactions are not fate. Your triggers are not fate. Your heartbreak is not fate. They're all messages from your shadow. And once you decode them, you change your entire emotional script. Now let's get even more practical. Here are 5 Carl Jung-inspired questions to ask yourself in moments of emotional chaos. What part of me is feeling this most? Is it the adult me or the abandoned child? If I didn't act on this feeling, what would happen? Can I sit in discomfort without rushing to fix it? What emotion is beneath this one? Is my anger really grief? Is my silence really fear? What memory is this tied to? Who does this remind me of? What would emotional control look like in this moment? Not perfect, just aware, just present. You don't need to be emotionless. You need to be anchored. Because the moment you stop reacting, the game changes. People stop being able to manipulate you. Your peace becomes intimidating. Your silence becomes powerful. And here's the final truth. When you master your emotions, you don't become cold. You become clear. You don't chase. You attract. You don't explain. You observe. You don't perform. You exist. And the right people, the ones who are also emotionally evolved, will meet you in that stillness. They won't trigger your chaos. They'll meet your peace. And that, my friend, is where real connection begins. In that space between fear and reaction, where you are no longer a puppet to your past, where your boundaries don't require explanation, where your emotional control is not performative, it's embodied, and you don't scream it, you live it. So the next time someone tries to provoke you, to pull you into their emotional storm, to test you with silence, games, or guilt, don't react. Don't fight for clarity. Don't trade your peace for their chaos. Just remember this. You are not here to win their approval. You are here to master yourself. And when you finally do, you'll realize that emotional control isn't about becoming untouchable. It's about becoming unshakable. Silence becomes your sword. Boundaries become your armor. And self-respect becomes your entire language. That's when you stop surviving and start commanding your world. If this video shook something inside you, if you felt like Carl Jung was speaking directly to your shadow, then don't just scroll away. Hit like to protect this video in your feed. Comment the one moment that hit hardest. Subscribe to Psychatic for more truths most people can't handle. And if you want to support this kind of content, tap that super thanks and show the algorithm that depth still matters. Because next week, we go even darker.